So this video is going to be a little bit different from anything else that I've done before, assuming that everything goes according to plan. And what that plan is that I'm going to talk about myself, my channel, my content, and just also interesting thoughts that I have on my mind unrelated to any of those subjects. And what I hope is that you will listen and respond to my thoughts in the comments below. And then tomorrow I'll make another video similar to this one after having read those comments, in which I will attempt to advance the conversation even further. For a very long time I've been trying to figure out how to incorporate response to the audience into my content directly. Because for me, the thing I want the most from my content is communication. Like the biggest point of doing, of being an internet personality for me has always been the opportunity to potentially communicate with like-minded individuals, because like-minded individuals were not something I had an easy time finding outside of the internet. So, as somebody who struggled to find connections throughout my childhood, who, most of my interactions with people my age growing up were taken negatively by myself, we'll say. I never really developed social skills that made communication easier. It's like I just felt like I fundamentally was on a different page from the people around me, because the assumptions that they would make about me based on my appearance and my attitude were things that I thought were incorrect about myself. Chief among those, the idea that I was a girl, because people would look at me and, based on the way I acted and looked as a kid, assume that I was a girl. And it drove me insane, because categorically I was assigned male at birth. I have male parts, so it was like, I'm not a girl. I don't understand why you would call me that, right? It's the way I felt as a kid. And I guess as an adult, I now do understand why they would call me that. And, as soon as I reached my teen years, I felt this enormous disconnect because of the fact that I suddenly, became a man. I grew tall, I grew body hair, facial hair, I, looked different, I felt different, and it all felt wrong, because I had loved the person that I was as a child. I never had a problem with myself other than in the fact that I couldn't fit in. I never hated myself for feeling the way that I do. I hated myself for the fact that, that other people couldn't understand me, and I couldn't figure out how to make them understand me. And even though, it had been insisted to me that I was supposedly smart throughout my life, what that really led to was me becoming extremely self-reliant. Like, feeling like because I am smart, I have to figure everything out for myself, and I can't bother my parents, who worked so hard, and went through so much trouble to raise me, when they themselves barely knew what they were doing. They had their own rough upbringings. They don't really, know any more than I do about many of the things I'm dealing with. So, but like, what I never really appreciated throughout my life is that it's when they say, it's not about what you can do, it's what you know, who you know. And it's not just about who you know, in the sense that, if you happen to know people who can do things for you, then that's beneficial. That's a very cynical way of looking at it. But it's also a matter of, like, who you know that can help you. Who do you know that will be able to understand what you're saying and help you with your problems? And, when I was a kid, all the emotions I was experiencing, everything I was feeling, I didn't understand. Like, there's nobody who I could talk to, at least that I thought I could talk to, that was going to understand what the fuck I was talking about, because of the fact that it just seemed like nobody was tuned into the stuff that I cared about. And that's largely because my sense of identity as a child was almost entirely based in what I was a fan of. Because, you know, my family, I was fairly disconnected from my extended family throughout my early childhood. And my family doesn't really have any sense of, like, cultural heritage or, like, you know, my parents very much did not want to be like their own parents, you know, so they were sort of countercultural and just had their own interests. And, you know, my mom was a punk goth, and my dad joined the military to drop out of high school, and then as soon as he was out of the military, he was married and had a kid. So it's like, you know, I view my parents as people who didn't really have any kind of personal support network themselves, because their families were already warped and fucked, you know, and like it wasn't so easy as just simply, you know, having strong personal connections. And for me, as a very shy kid who really struggled to communicate, who was not assertive, who didn't relate to any aspect of, you know, of being a boy, that, you know, like, it's like, I never understood why people were making the assumptions about me that they were. Like, why do you think that me being a boy means I have to be into this, this, and this? And, you know, and why does me being into what I am into make me a girl? That was what I couldn't comprehend growing up. And the reason that sex and gender have been scientifically, you know, removed from one another, the reason that they are now considered differently. I actually never came back and talked to this guy the first time I played this, and I had no idea that he built all these sandcastles. It's pretty adorable. He came in. I built this city. That's good. I realized that I've not explained what this game is in any way, but I probably will later. So for now, it's just, you know, it just looks like Animal Crossing and is very pleasant. That's all you really need to know. But yeah, so like, I think that, you know, in terms of where there are people who could understand me and help me and communicate with me in a way that was, you know, that I could understand what they were trying to say and they could understand what I was trying to say. It's not that I found that necessarily when I came to the internet, because I certainly didn't find like an easy accepting community or like people that, you know, people that could get through the just compounded. Oh my god, he built it all the way out to the point that I have a feather now. I had no idea. This is a golden feather I did not get on my first playthrough. Now it's a sand province. This is amazing. He's going to be the mayor of Sandville. This is basically like the City Hall by Tenacious D. Alright, well now I've got a double jump, so that's fucking sick. Now I can easily go get that other double jump. This game this whole game is a metaphor about how, like, the more opportunities you seize, the easier a time you have seizing future opportunities. How, like, things that were out of your grasp, that you could try to find an alternate way of getting it. And a lot of the time there is an alternate way of getting it, but then once you already have something like it, then like getting the next one is like half as difficult. Anyway, so what I was trying to say is that, like, for me growing up, the idea that like me behaving a certain way is inherently feminine, you know, was something that I was like opposed to. And so I would say that, you know, I was consider myself to basically have been a gender abolitionist from childhood. You know, I guess that's sort of my mom's attitude, so it became my attitude, you know. And like, I appreciate that mindset, and I ultimately think that that's like where I want society to go. Like, I wish people didn't care about gender. I wish people ultimately could just be who they want, enjoy being who they want. But at the same time, I do think there's also a heavy element of like the body dysmorphia and also just body image problems that all plays into this. That, like, for me, I think was the biggest thing preventing me from acknowledging my own femininity is that, like, so, when I was a kid, it was like, don't look at me as a girl because I'm a boy. And so your social expectations of me will be wrong if you think of me as a girl. However, I only thought that because I did not understand really what society's expectations of these genders actually were. Like, I mean, it became clear to me very quickly that I didn't relate to the stuff that was, that was being said to be stuff for boys. Like, if I'm watching Cartoon Network, if you watch cartoons as a kid, which is all I watched, then, like, the marketing that you see on TV is extremely gendered. There is stuff that is for boys, stuff that is for girls, and it is, marked by the tone of the commercials and who is in them. And it's like, the stuff for boys would be like playing with slime monsters and fucking gack and, like, gross out stuff that I was legitimately found, like, disgusting. Like, I was never into any kind of gross out stuff as a kid. And, like, the stuff for girls is like Easy Bake Oven and Learn How to Take Care of Baby, which I always saw as, like, practical things that would be interesting, but, like, I never engaged those things because they were marketed as feminine, and, like, I understand from a marketing perspective why you would want to do things this way, because you're trying to pitch it towards the audience that is, most likely to have an interest. And, it's also, like, feeds into what their parents' expectations of them are, and, makes sure that, you're not, like, ruffling any feathers by showing a boy fucking playing with a Barbie doll or something, But, like, it's just, like, I wish that I, as somebody who saw myself as, like, extremely true to myself, as somebody who saw myself as, like, oh, I'm not going to change to benefit others, but, like, the what I saw as the thing that I wasn't going to change was wrong. It's like I literally ignored my own interests in order to preserve a stubborn idea, because, like, I didn't want to admit that I was wrong about the fact that people had me better pegged as a girl, that, like, those people who said, oh, you can't be a boy because you look like this or you have these interests or you act this way, like, to suggest that my interests were, in fact, feminine would be to prove them right. To say, like, yeah, you're right. I am more like a girl than a boy, And I did not want that to be true because I saw it as, like, well, I am a boy, so whatever I like is what a boy likes, right? And maybe that's fair to some extent, but that's not how I felt anymore after I went through puberty. Because I felt disconnected from my whole identity as somebody who was used to being small and frail and afraid, and who was hiding behind my long hair, who was insecure and, and wanted to be taken care of by the adults around me, and wanted to be seen as, like, weak and fragile in a way. And I couldn't be anymore. And, like, again, this is where I come down to, like, how so much of my problem really is just body image concern. It's really, like, it's not so much about the fact that, like, I was afraid of being a girl. It's that I was afraid of being an ugly girl. That I was afraid of, like, it's one thing for society to see you as, as something that you're not, but something that's acceptable, as opposed to something that's unacceptable that you are. And, confidence is all about just deciding that you don't care. Like, you really don't care if people look at you and, you know, and think those things about you. It's like, I love myself, and therefore, you know, I can be myself, and I can be true to I can have full emotional experiences because I am having them as myself. And for me, it's very difficult to have an emotional experience without being like extremely open to that experience, you know? Like, I have so many layers of cynicism, so many layers of expectation that things will go wrong or bad, because like that's how I saw my life growing up, is, you know, like, even though I am an optimist overall, like, I think that I am significantly more optimistic than most people because of the fact that, like, I am more capable of fixating on the positive, I guess, than a lot of people are in, like, things that happen. It's just, like, I guess my expectations that things will go wrong sets me in a position where it feels like things go better than I expected most of the time, you know? I've always said that my motto is high hopes and low expectations. But my point is that growing up, in that mindset that, like, you can't trust anybody unless they speak to you first, or they open up to you, because, like, the expectation is always that, like, things will go bad if you try to talk to this person, because people never understand you. People always get the wrong idea. People always make assumptions based on the way you look or who they think you are that are not true to who you are as a person. And it's just like, when I was a kid, I was literally anti-girl because I did not want to be seen as a girl. I was so frustrated about getting confused for a girl that I wanted nothing to do with them, so I didn't talk to them. So I didn't learn what the girls were learning. And, like, if I had, I think I would have realized that, like, that was my camp. That, like, these were my interests. Because and this is, it's hard for me to talk about this to my audience in particular, to you, because you have seen me as Digibro, which is a deliberate character performance, you know? Like, not to say that Digibro is untrue to myself. Like, everything that Digibro has been is something that I also am. It's just not the full picture. And it's like, and not to say that you're ever getting the full picture when you watch a content creator. And maybe it seems like it's a big deal to be like, oh, this wasn't even a man this whole time. This person saw themselves as a woman. That seems like a big secret to keep. But in a way, it was the only secret I was keeping. Is it really that big of a secret if the only real difference between how you see me and how I see me is that, you know, that there's this other feminine side that I don't really reveal? But, like, eventually I came to realize that is the difficulty people have in understanding me. It's that, you know, I'm expressing something about my desire to be true to myself and my desire to, you know, to really, I don't know, talk about things I care about. And yet things I care about are the hardest thing for me to talk about. It's like, the more indifferent I am towards something, or even the more negative I am towards something, the easier it is to recognize, like, what, I guess, insecurities that I have about myself are represented, you know, in the work or something like that. Whereas if I feel really strong, like if I really love something, then it's like I have to really address myself to understand why I love this thing. You know, like, I really have to understand myself to understand what this thing is saying about me. And that's difficult to do when you're in denial about yourself, or when there's parts that you're overlooking, or when you only want to talk about the parts that have been logically justified. And, like, this is going to be difficult for me to, like, put into a linear train of thought here, but, like, there was a episode of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic called I think it's called Feeling Pinkie Keen. And it's an episode where we learn that Pinkie Pie has this, like, sixth sense called the Pinkie sense, where, like, parts of her body will vibrate or move in response to something that's about to happen. Like, for instance, her tail will shake if something's about to fall from the sky. And this is just like an inexplicable phenomenon that happens with Pinkie Pie. And like Twilight, who is a scientist, does not want to believe that this is actually possible. She's like, there's no logical reason why your tail would wag before something falls from the sky. So she's like, there must be some reason this is happening. I'm going to figure it out. And so she spends the whole episode studying Pinkie Pie, trying to get to the bottom of why does she have this ability. And through all of her studies, she cannot justify the fact that Pinkie Pie has this. Like, she can't figure out why it's happening. And so she continues trying to deny the fact that it is happening. But in the end, she finds herself in a scenario where she has to believe in the her ability in order to make it through a situation. And so I guess the episode was called Leap of Faith, now that I think about it. But because it's about taking a leap of faith. And that's what Twilight has to do in the end, is she has to appreciate that even if you cannot explain why something is the way it is, it doesn't mean that it isn't that way. And this is like something that should be obvious, and like it's something you really need to understand to be an effective scientist. But like, it is something that I think we all struggle with in our lives, and especially in modern culture, and especially because of our worship of lexicality. That like my generation and the new ones coming after it are like obsessed with science. We're obsessed with this idea that like the old world was ruined by superstition and by following emotions and by people who don't think things through. And like, it's only now that we have found logical justifications for, different elements of like something like, say, the trans experience, that we can like say, okay, this is scientifically a thing, and like, people need to listen up about it. But it's like, people should have listened up about it in the first place, because the problem is not that we didn't know why people feel the way they do. The problem is that people can't respect letting others do, like express themselves and feel the way that they want to feel, as long as it's not hurting anybody. And like, that's always going to be the issue. That's always like, for me, I would consider myself in the core of my philosophy an anarchist. Somebody I would consider myself basically a I won't say anarcho-primitivist, more like I still like technology, but I'm going to call myself an crypto-primitivist. So like, ultimately, the society that I want is one where, like, I guess I'm a hippie is ultimately what I'm trying to say. Is that like, I want a world with unity and one love, and no need for government, and no need for anybody to even, worry about the police, because nobody would commit any crimes in the first place, because everybody understands why they are participating in the system. And this is not an impossible world to reach. It's not even necessarily a difficult world to reach on a long enough scale if people were legitimately working towards it as the goal. And I think that in our hearts we all are. And it's really difficult to do that without science and without justification, because science is the only thing that allows us to say, like, okay, like, these rules have some kind of grounds behind them. Whereas, like, all the other rules that everybody else has, are just couched in, like, tradition or location or personal belief. Whereas, like, these things can be verified, counter-verified to the furthest extent that humanity is capable of doing such a thing, So it's like, I forgot I had to fucking advance the text in that conversation. But yeah, like, it's like, I caught a fucking fish. Yeah, I caught a common carp. I was real distracted by trying to catch that fish. It was making it really difficult to remember what the fuck I was trying to say. That's why I'm trying to play a game with very little actual, like, stuff you have to do in it. Not that I even had to do that. I just wanted the fishing rod. But trying to remember exactly what I'm trying to say with this rant I'm going on. It's just like, I made this video once about how objectivity as a phrase should be replaced with consensus. Because, like, we don't know anything for absolute sure. Because we don't know how limited our perceptions are as humans. Like, we don't know what we don't know. So it's difficult for us to make judgments about truth with a capital T. But anything that we've justified as a belief, we append the phrase true to that, and it's as close to true as things get. But again, that doesn't make them objective. It just means that we have come to a consensus based on the observations that we're capable of. And there are some matters, such as taste, in which there cannot be a 100% consensus. Like, there's going to be a majority consensus, and in this world, majority ultimately ends up being the, what we look at as truth in a lot of circumstances. Basically in any circumstance in which we need to find out something considerable as truth, But, like, it's never truth. It's always consensus. And so it's better to look at it that way. And so, like, if it is an objective fact that I am male because of the fact that I biologically am that way, then that's all well and good. But if the consensus among people who interact with me is that I am female, then which one is really more true? That's the question that I guess I have to posit to myself. And it's funny because, I'm Mr. Objective doesn't exist. And yet, the thing that stopped me from, seeing myself as a woman for so long is just the lack of logical justification. The lack of, like, something I could point to as a reason. Now, granted, part of it is also that I was so in denial that I didn't really do my research. And if I had, I probably would have found better justifications, such as the knowledge I now have that gender identity forms before you're 4 years old, and that, my entire childhood was pretty much spent idolizing my mom exclusively, and having no real interest in any kind of, again, masculine activity. So, like, I guess it was too late. It's like, by the time my parents tried to make me raise me as a boy, I already had no connection to it and no interest in it, but again, I was so insistent that I categorically was a boy that I just ignored anything that had to do with girls. And, like, what finally allowed me to start appreciating girls was my interest in anime. And, like, initially my interest in anime came as a result of the fact that it's full of effeminate men. You've got characters like Inuyasha, characters like Haku from Naruto, characters like Jing from King of Bandits Jing. These were, like, the first characters that I related to in anime that made me, care about the medium in a more personal sense. And, like, Kenshin from Rurouni Kenshin, as well as other characters in that series, Like, these are characters who looked like me, and I had never had an interest in stuff like Dragon Ball Z or any of that because, like, those weren't who I saw myself growing up to be. Like, I did not want to grow up to be a big, muscly guy. I wanted to grow up to be a, silver-haired pretty boy, demon creature, half-breed, I wanted to be Inuyasha. I did not want to be Brawly, So it's like, once I turned 14 and had my, went through puberty, I no longer wanted to be Inuyasha. I wanted to be what I used to be. I wanted to be a boy who looked like a little girl again. And I became really obsessed with traps because back then the concept of trans was not something I'd ever heard of. I only knew anime culture. So I knew about traps. I knew about, Shotacon and Lolicon. And I didn't connect with wanting to be a little boy, though. Like, I never connected with Shota, even though I literally was, like, like the point of Shota is that you look like a little boy. I did not look like a little boy. I looked like a little girl. I looked like a lolly. Like, and it became about like the obsession with getting back to that, with wanting to be that again, and not really understanding any way of accomplishing that in real life that I saw as being acceptable. And like, I was overweight. And I stayed overweight, and I think I kept being overweight partially as a convenient excuse. Because in my mind, it was always like, if you lose weight, you can wear girls' clothes, and you can be a girl. And so it was kind of like, if I ever did lose weight, there'd be nothing to stop me. There'd be no reason I couldn't wear girls' clothes. There'd be no reason I wouldn't just transition. And so I think my fear of doing that prevented me from actually doing it, because even though I've gone on weight loss like programs like many times and effectively lost weight, I would always get close to my goal and then kind of like skirt away and like let myself go again and like become afraid. And it's like, it took me having the realization, when I realized that I needed to be honest, and I needed to come out, and I needed to admit to myself that I feel like, that I felt this way on the inside. When I had that realization, and then I saw myself, like, once I saw myself as a woman, even before, like, even without having to lose weight and having to look the part. Like, once I was willing to accept myself as an ugly woman instead of, feeling like, oh, you're not a woman unless you look attractive, or unless you, can pass. It's like, passing is not what makes you a woman. And I know that because I was, I've already been a feminist from the start. If you watch my old content, I spew a lot of rhetoric about like embracing femininity and about like, not looking at it as just an appearances thing, but as, femininity is a lot more, and the powers of what we traditionally think of as feminine thinking goes beyond things that are represented aesthetically or just in, common behaviors. But, like, again, for it to even have any definition at all, for us to even have the concept of, like, feminine or masculine thinking, it's like, that is only bred out of what are commonalities between, women. It's again, there's no absolutes. There's no meaning in saying that, like, oh, all women act like this, because it's just not true. But the question then is, do all people who act like this be considered women? Like, if I act this way, does it matter whether I'm a boy or a girl? Am I a woman because of how I act? Or am I a woman because of my biological gender? And because of the fact that people, because of the fact that society has expectations of gender, functionally, gender becomes something different from sex. It functionally becomes that, yes, if society looks at you that way, then you are functionally a woman, because it's easier for society to compartmentalize the fact that you have these similarities with that group of people than it is for them to see things the opposite way. And, like, this is what people, like, what the TERFs, like, the trans-exclusionary radical feminists like J.K. Rowling, don't want to acknowledge about the trans experience, is the idea that a man can live a life that is more like a woman's than some women. And, like, because, again, one part of feminism is saying that, like, being a woman doesn't mean these certain stereotypes or these certain shared experiences. So just because you're a man who fits those stereotypes and experiences doesn't make you a woman, because to suggest that is to suggest that you are less of a woman if you don't have those experiences, But, like, again, it's not, the stereotypes are just things that arise out of the circumstance of the pattern of thought, you know? And so it's like my mom is somebody who does not fit into a lot of feminine stereotypes. And as a result, you know, I think a lot of my disconnect from like femininity growing up is partially the result of the fact that my mom did not like feminine things. The things that she liked are, you know, usually more considered masculine, but the way that she likes them is not what I would consider masculine. And it's hard to really describe like what the difference is. But like in my mind, there's essentially what I consider to be essentially the masculine frame of mind is that of basically existing for the sake of protecting others. Like, as a boy is a gun, if you will, as Tyler the Creator so eloquently put it, you know? Like, even within your own mind, I like to think that we can all recognize like both a paternal and maternal instinct within ourselves on some level. We have some desire to protect the emotions of other people and some desire to protect people physically. And so the best way to protect someone physically is often through logistics. And I think that, you know, that men, it's not that they are inherently better at this or the other way around. It's just that like what I see as the masculine ideal, what I see as like if you are trying to be the ideal, the idealized social construct of a man, then what you are ultimately trying to do is to be a provider as best you can for your family and community. And this can mean that you are physically capable of doing things that are helpful. It can mean that you are mentally capable of doing things that are helpful. But like ultimately your job is to fix problems, to execute orders, you know, like essentially a soldier, essentially a, you know, somebody who is which, you know, is celebrated in a lot of masculine imagery, is about being a soldier, about just, you know, I am the force that moves to protect the things that need to be protected. And in many ways, the feminine ideal is to be that which gives direction to that force, to essentially be the entire human being on the other side of that gun. Now, obviously, as I said before, I think everybody has these two energies within them. Everybody has a masculine and feminine side. And like, you know, there's a part of you that's giving direction to the other part of you. But there are some people whose comfort zone is really having to think as little as possible. It's like, I don't want to think about why I am doing what I am doing because that gets in the way of my ability to actually do it. That's how a lot of people look at the world, you know? And then there's other people who look at it as having to do things takes me away from the time I get to spend thinking about things, you know? The time I get to spend really trying to understand myself and the people around me and what's going on. And so, like, when your basis for those things, when your understanding of those things doesn't have a strong foundation of logic, or is couched in your lack of just having logistical understandings of the world in general, this is what manifests as something that resembles like borderline personality or schizophrenia. This sense of like you're constantly studying the world and trying to understand it, but the terms through which you understand it are perhaps more metaphorical or don't follow the logic of you like asking questions and looking for answers as much as just like, you know, attempting to recognize patterns, you know? And the better you are at recognizing patterns, the better you can do this. And like, you know, somebody who is really socially capable, regardless of gender, is going to be somebody who, you know, is good in those traits. Sorry, fucking sometimes when the music changes in the game, it puts me in a totally different frame of mind, and I have to like really like stop for a second and just explore that area for a while and keep that music going. But it's like, you know, we all have a duality of, like, the amount of our mind that's dedicated to, like, just thinking about shit, and the amount of it that's dedicated to doing shit. And we also have, you know, the more emotional and the more logistical sides of our brain. And, like, all of these things are working in concert. But, like, we all have different comfort zones. And, like, when I made my neurotyping chart in video, like, I really liked Carla's idea of the heat maps. This idea that, like, you know, there's, like, a certain range of how you tend to be. And I definitely think that everybody has, you know, different things that they excel at. Like, I kind of posited this idea that there's people in different categories that are, like, low IQ versions of that category. And IQ is a part of it, of course. Like, some people are just, like, have more functional brains than others, I guess. But, like, I also think there's a lot of people who are just performing the wrong role. There's a lot of people who are out there, like, trying to be, like, very lexical when they have very impressionistic minds, and it makes it so everything they do is a struggle, you know? But there's also people who, like, are, because they think the opposite way, they are therefore, like, through putting in that extra effort, even more capable of explaining things that maybe, you know, a more lexical person would overlook, because they're not even noticing the impressionistic details that you are, much less capable of, you know, talking about them. And I would say I fall kind of into that category because, like, oh, the way forward is blocked. I guess I have to unlock another route, another spot to get through there. But yeah, like for instance, you know, I would consider myself to be a much more impressionistic, a much more emotional thinker. And I never really understood that, because I never really understood the concept of emotional thinking until when I, you know, devised the neurotyping chart, which was largely out of me trying to understand dyslexia and autism. And then I ended up stumbling upon something completely different, which was lexicality versus impressionism. But, like, at either extreme, I think, is something that people consider to be autism. It's like, well, I think the extreme end of emotional thinking is what people look at as schizophrenia and borderline personality. And I think the extreme end of lexical thinking is what people look at as autism. But there's a lot of similarities in, like, the fact that they both lead to extreme social awkwardness and anxiety disorder, you know, because they're just two different versions of not being, like, in that chill center where society wants you. And it's like, I can pretend, like, the fact that I marked myself as an analyst was really funny, because it really showed me how much I was buying into my own, like, character. That, like, yeah, Digibro is an analyst. Digibro, the character, is based on me taking the things I have thought about the hardest and spent the most time figuring out how to put into words, and then putting those things into words. So, like, yeah, if you're talking about my analytical videos, then sure, they are very lexical because that's what they're going out of their way to be. But that's not how I think. That's just, you know, that's just the nature of my content. And it's precisely because of the fact that I have such a left field approach to, you know, to lexical writing, that it comes out unique. And that, you know, the biggest problem with it is it pretends to be more lexical than it really is. But again, that's out of my lack of really understanding this difference, and, like, why people champion lexical thought in the first place, like why it is even seen as worthwhile. So it's just like, I feel as though my whole career has been couched in confusion over, like, what it means to be more comprehensible, what it means to connect with people more strongly, or to be more understandable. Because in my mind, it was just like, I guess when people don't understand me, it means I have to explain in more depth, explain with more words, explain in even more detail. But that doesn't make people understand you better. That's not really how it works. People understand you better when you can communicate in a way that just reaches them as a person the most effectively. And so, like, if you're trying to reach the most people that you can, the key to doing that is not to make the most lexical video. The key to doing that is to make something that appeals to the biggest variety of people. The thing that will simultaneously appeal to a more lexical thinker and a more impressionistic thinker. And all of the videos I've made that are the most celebrated have successfully done this. And on some level, I understood what I was doing, but not on enough of a level to where I could extrapolate from that, like, what is good about my content? Like, what are people coming to me for? What is it about my successful videos that makes them successful? You know, like, I was fixated on, like, there's multiple factors, and it's like I was fixated on the wrong factors and lacking a real understanding of, like, what do people really want from me, you know? And so, like, now that I feel like I have a grasp of that, it's like I realized that, you know, the assumptions I was making about, like, what people really wanted from me are not necessarily correct. And so it's like, with that being in mind, it's like, why ever be anything other than what I want to be the most? And I feel like I've effectively pretended like that's what I was already doing, and to some extent it is. Like, content-wise, in terms of, like, what I want from analysis videos and, like, what I'm capable of doing in the realm of other things like music or art or things like that, like, I've done as much as I really can, like, in terms of my skill set. So it's not as though I've, like, forsaken this, like, massive element of my identity, just because of the fact that, like, you know, I've put more, maybe, like, more focus on analysis videos than I would like to. It's like, it's not a matter of the content that I've made having not represented me well. It's a matter of, like, not having found myself, like, willing to take the time to explore the things that, like, I don't have confidence in. So, like, for instance, making music, right? Like, I became a rapper because of the fact that I can't play any instruments. Like, most of the musical ideas I had in my youth were for rock songs. And I wrote a bunch of songs, you know, before I ever got into rap music, that, like, I just thought, well, I'll never be able to perform these songs because I can't play any fucking instruments, you know? So, like, I might as well give up on being able to make music unless I can find a band. Like, unless I can find people who can play instruments, who I can explain these songs to. But, like, the friends I had who could play instruments, like, were not capable of understanding, like, by way of verbal explanation, like, what I want a song to sound like. And I, you know, never learned how to read music. So I just kind of saw it as, like, until the day that I, you know, stop being lazy, or it wasn't even really a matter of laziness, because I did try to learn instruments. I just didn't really understand, like, how to learn an instrument. But, like, I think that if I had a better understanding of, like, what I needed to do to become a musician, instead of giving up, instead of, like, being like, oh, I can't sing. Like, nobody wants to hear me sing. Nobody wants to hear me make, like, these weird experimental songs that I make. Like, they don't get any attention, so I'm just gonna stop doing them, and instead I'm gonna do the stuff that does get me attention. And it's like, that mentality is what has driven me away from, like, just sticking with trying to learn music, you know, until I actually know it. It's like I stuck with doing analytical writing until I was good at it because I thought it had utility for me. It's like it helped me to understand myself and my tastes for me to analyze things. So it's like, you know, continuing to do that came naturally because it felt like it was the only way I could really understand myself. Whereas, like, anything that I really wanted to do, like making music or writing stories, that I wasn't getting positive affirmation for, it's like, well, I don't know if anyone will ever like this. Like, I don't know if I'm just like not capable of writing something that will connect with people because I'm just too different. Like maybe like my life experiences just don't relate to other people. And like it wasn't until I became popular that I met people who were more similar to me than ever before. That like, you know, I got involved in communities where there were other people feeling things way more similar to what I was. And, you know, nobody who is like really in my fan base is that surprised that I came out as trans, because I've always had a huge trans contingent of my following. I've talked about trans issues and gender dysphoria throughout my career. But like my ability to actually recognize myself as a trans person is only possible because of the fact that I actually have interacted with trans people and found out that like what I'm feeling is something relatable, that like it's not unique to me. And like I think that also oh, I have to find this guy's watch. I didn't realize. I guess I had already found it by the time I talked to him the first time I played this. So like when I think about like the beginnings of my career, when I was getting famous as a brony, I still looked at comments as like the only thing that mattered. Like back when I wrote an anime blog, I didn't care about the views because I didn't trust them. I thought it was just all bots. It was like, unless you left a comment, I had no way of knowing that you actually like engaged with what I wrote, that you like cared, or I did not know about this. I don't have any running shoes, but I'll do it anyway. But yeah, like, oh god, I'm fucking getting my ass kicked immediately. But yeah, like, I just think, I you know, early in my career, the mentality was, I'm going to like connect with everybody who offered me a Skype contact. I would take it. You know, I had like hundreds of Skype contacts. I interacted with lots of like just weird people, lots of weird kids and shit who were like, you know, I want to meet a famous person. And I'm like, you are terrifying. You need to, you know, you need parental supervision. You need to get off the internet. But just be like, you know, I found like myself just interacting with so many fucking strange people that that like just drained my time and energy. And like a lot of people who I really tried to help, and they just like wouldn't listen to my advice, you know, and I would watch them just like keep fucking up their lives, and I'd be like, I don't want to be involved in this anymore. Like I just got sick of putting myself out there because it was too painful for me to deal with, you know, the results of those relationships. And it's like, you know, I just never throughout my life really learned how to like get past problems in a relationship. It's like I never had any friendships where, you know, I had to deal with turmoil and come back, aside from my brothers. And so like, you know, in a way, I guess, you know, it's not like I was totally socially inept because I had my family and all, but like, you know, like, to me, it was just like, I don't want to deal with anything that's a hassle. Like, I have to run my career. I have to make money. I have to reach a point where I feel comfortable before I can come back out and engage with people. And then it's like, I reached that point where I felt comfortable, but I didn't know how to engage with people anymore because I didn't know who I wanted to be, or like, what was the point? Like, who am I trying to become? And I really felt like I wouldn't know who that was until I found somebody I wanted to be with. Because I really felt like I cannot live this life by myself. Like, I am not mentally strong enough to keep doing this alone because, like, I've already succeeded and I still feel weak, you know? Like, when I made Gay and Dead, when I was making all my vlogs back in 2016, that was a real emotional low point of my life. And it's so sad to me that, like, so many people look at that as, like, a content golden age of mine. And, like, yeah, I was making the most content I ever did because I was the most depressed and the most lonely, and I needed the internet. I needed those parasocial relationships because I didn't want to get close to anybody specifically. I didn't want to just have like one-on-one interactions with people because the way I saw it was like, you know, if you're not going to, if it's not my girlfriend, then what's the point, you know, in a way. And like once I finally had a girlfriend, I really shut myself out. Like I basically lost touch with the internet because like the internet had never been able to give me what I'd been looking for until I met May. And she gave me what I was looking for from the internet. And like, once I had that acceptance from her, I was ready to move on to the next step. Like, I had come to realize that, like, okay, this is my problem as a person, is that I don't engage with people, that, like, I'm secluded, that I'm afraid of, like, I'm too afraid of interactions. And I truly understood it when I tried to close comments, because it was just so difficult to have conversations every day with people who had so many wrong ideas about me that, like, it was, you know, it was like really difficult to have those conversations where I'm like, you know, trying to like talk about myself and having to like navigate re-explaining to all these different people all this different shit. It was more than I could stand. And like, I just hated being misunderstood so much. Like, I mean, it is the core of my videos, the emotional core of my videos is this desire to be understood, and being misunderstood felt like a dagger in me every time it happened, you know? But like, once I finally had somebody who did understand me, and I felt like comfortable in that, I felt less and less of this need to have other people understand me. And so I took this mindset of like, okay, I don't need to make 1,000 vlogs in a day to feel connected to humanity anymore, because I have a wife and I can go be with her, and I can go, you know, be with her family or my family, or try to make our own family, or talk to my friends or people who who are my selected family, you know, like people who I want to spend time with, and I have real good connections on the internet and stuff. So it's like, you know, I have the kind of friends now where I don't need to express every single thing that comes into my head to the internet in order to find somebody who's going to connect with every fucking thing in my head. I literally live with somebody who can connect with everything in my head. So like, a lot of that impetus to, you know, to be who I had been on the internet just kind of disappeared. And it was like, well, how do I reconcile that? Like, how do I reconcile the person that I am becoming with the content that I've created all this time? Like, and so my answer to that was I need to work with other people. Like the conclusion I had come to was I need to incorporate more voices into my work, but like, I don't know how. Like, I'm bad at communicating. I don't know how to communicate to other people what I want from them in a project. And so like, it was a real struggle at first to figure out like, how will I incorporate other people into my work? So I had this really huge idea for how they marketed, and like the key factor of how they marketed was the fact that I was going to involve other people in it. And like, the gimmick of episode 2 was going to be that it was how they marketed Pop Team Epic, and whereas that show like incorporated all these unique styles of all these different artists, I wanted my video to do the same, and I was going to market it the same way that show is marketed. But like, my mentality towards like have people work with me was just pay people to do segments. Like, that was the way I was looking at it, was like, this is how I'll incorporate other people into my work, is like, I will pay them to do things for my video. And like, because I felt like I had the money, because like, I was living way below my means, and to me, like, I was living the life I wanted to live. So the fact that I had extra money means like, why not just give it to people who I'm friends with, who are great artists, so that they can work with me, you know? And it's like, I think I just, for so much of my career, I was so fixated on what I could do with money. It's like, the thing my friends need is money. My friends are broke, you know? If I can make money, I can help my friends. I can give them money. And like, that was always my mindset, but it's like, I need more money. Like, I'm only making enough money to satisfy myself, to live the life I want to live. I need more money before I can help other people, you know? But like, helping other people is something you can do in a lot more ways than just giving people money. Like, people need emotional support. People have never come to me for money. They come to me for the fact that I help them to understand themselves better, and I help them to understand the world or the things they like better. And that's literally what people like about me, is my counsel, you know? People like that I am able to help them understand their own psychology and that of others. I'm essentially a pop psychologist through media. That is what I would consider to be like a pop scientist / sociologist. You know, I study through the medium of like how people express themselves. And so in a way, it's like I understand people's deeper sides more than I understand their shallow sides. I don't understand the masks people wear. I don't understand the things people do to try to fit in. I don't understand the attitude of norminess, like why people put themselves into that state. Because I look at myself as somebody who, you know, if my desires were being fulfilled, the world would be a very different place. And so it's not so easy for me to live by instinct in this world where my instincts are telling me that everything's wrong, where my instincts are telling me like, okay, you need to fix all these things before you can feel safe, you know? And like, in a strange way, I feel safer in the world now than I ever did before, because of the fact that people are so afraid. That I feel as though, you know, when Hunter Thompson wrote about fear and loathing, he lived in a world where it seemed like people didn't have enough fear and loathing. And I live in a world where people have too much fear and loathing, and what they need is love and tolerance. And I think that that's something I can teach a lot better than fear and loathing. I am not good at teaching people why the world is bad. I'm good at teaching people why the world is good, because I really believe in the goodness of the world and the goodness of people. And that my hope in that is what allows me to live and get through life, is the fact that I don't see the world as a dark and depressing place. I mean, I do, but I see it as one where there's people who are looking out for you, and like, you know, and I want to be one of those people. So it's like, the value of my content, the value of me as a human being, in my mind, is my ability to support people emotionally. And I am the most capable of doing that when I am the most true to myself, when I am the most clear about my own intentions in my interactions. Because, you know, when you aren't being honest about who you are, it's very hard to be honest about what you want, you know? And so, like, for me, I feel like people in their interactions with me, even just watching my videos, there's always been so much confusion about my content, so much confusion about why my taste is what it is, so much confusion about, like, you know, I just don't get why Digi would fixate on this but not care about this. Like, why? And I always said, you know, art is about pushing your buttons. Like, it's the very first video in the Essential Digibro playlist, is that, like, ultimately it has less to do with judging everything by the same standard and more to do with me trying to understand what turned me off or what turned me onto a show, you know, because what's interesting to me about media is that it can help me to understand myself better. And the reason I needed to understand myself better is that I did not feel like the person who my body would suggest to you that I am. And I don't know how to express it to people because I didn't understand what the disconnect was. I didn't understand what about me was so effeminate in the beginning that it meant I had to be a girl. And then once I understood just even basic fact that, like, it wasn't wrong to have made that mistake about me, then it became the question of, like, well, why do I feel that way? And, like, how do I justify the idea that feeling that way makes me a woman when, you know, when feminism tells me that women can be anything, you know? And, like, so, like, in my mind, transgenderism, there's always some element of gender realism involved in it because of the fact that, like, again, it does kind of go in the face of feminism to suggest that, like, you know, oh, I feel this way, therefore I'm a woman. But again, gender identity is something that's really rooted into you when you're a child, you know? And, like, it's not that I see myself as, oh, I am a woman because I have X and Y traits. It's that it would be a lot easier if you saw me as a woman, because then your understanding of me would be closer to my intentions, you know? And so that's why, like I said earlier, I think in a way, gender only has meaning insofar as we decide these are masculine traits, these are feminine traits, you know? And so, like, do I think that in the long run it would be better for gender to just not exist? I do. But I find a comfort in knowing that you, at a glance, have at least some level of understanding about me. And I think that most of us, like, we are comforted by labels. Like, we are repulsed by labels that don't describe us. We are comforted by labels that do describe us. I've always been insistent on calling myself an otaku gonzo journalist. And when people asked, like, why would you give yourself 3 labels when you know, are anti-label? And the answer I've always given was, there is no way of interpreting those 3 labels that I am not comfortable with. There's no interpretation of the word otaku that I am uncomfortable with, regardless of how negative it might be. There's no interpretation of gonzo, you know, or journalist. Well, I guess there could be interpretations of journalist I would rather not be associated with, but I think of that as more of a descriptive term, more of a general term. People don't have as many expectations about. But it's just like, you know, to call myself a man or a woman was something I was a lot less comfortable with, because I don't know what those terms necessarily mean, you know, or what they mean to you. And I feel the certain level of guilt about calling myself a woman in a way, because, again, I don't want to reduce the experience had by, you know, women who don't necessarily identify with traditional gender roles, and to suggest that they are somehow less of a woman because of it. You know, again, I ultimately would rather that these terms didn't exist at all, but it's kind of like, if you look at me and make the assumption that, like, if you looked at me and you saw me and you thought I looked like a girl, and you made the assumption that I feel similarly to other girls that you've known, then I think that would be a more accurate way of thinking about me than if you were to think about me as a boy. And that is really what it comes down to in the end, to me, is like, that is where the comfort versus discomfort lies. And, like, our discomfort that we develop towards ourselves and our bodies, I think, largely comes as a result of us, like, internalizing an image of ourselves, like an emotional image that we cannot realize physically, and then thinking that that means that, like, that we cannot be ourselves. Like, if I don't look like the way I feel, then I'm not really me, you know? When in reality, we're all hiding something. Like, none of us is just expelling every random thought that comes into our head, or acting the same exact way around every person as we do around every other person, because it's just not even how the brain works. Like, personas, the idea of, you know, developing new ways that you yourself are through the interactions you have with other people, that is like a natural part of the process of thinking, you know, like, in communicating. So those are just tendencies that are always going to arise. But, like, to think that, like, fuck, I lost my train of thought because I talked to that fucking villager. It's like, to me, my comfort zone is to be extremely emotionally expressive and to feel comfortable in my environment. Ultimately, I would say that I feel most comfortable in a hug box. which is funny because I am kind of an edgelord, and I put myself into these sort of edgy communities and surrounded myself by edgy people, but that's because I find that to be comforting. Like, I find the idea, like, somebody who doesn't take themselves too seriously and isn't judgmental, that's what I find comforting. Like, people who make judgments about other people based on their beliefs or the way that they look, those are the people I don't trust. And, like, a lot of the people who would defend me or would be on my side because of my identity are people who I would not trust. Like, if you're on my side because I'm trans, then I don't trust you. You know, if you're on my side because you think that I'm a decent human being with good ideas, then it's like, that's cool, you know. And if I feel the same way about you, then we could have that mutual respect, you know. So it's like, for me, you know, I guess I never saw it as particularly important that I be thought of as trans, and I never wanted that to be like my excuse for like why my arguments are correct or something like that. You know, I never wanted it to be that like I brought out trans as my trump card, that like, oh, I'm allowed to talk about this issue because I feel like a woman on the inside, or because I've thought more about womanhood than most men, I guess. Like, it's just like, those aren't good arguments. It's like, if it seems like I understand women, then good, you know. And, you know, for a long time, my audience was dominantly women. So I felt pretty good about the idea that I understood women pretty well, because women felt comfortable watching my videos and with me as a person. But, like, you know, I really think that, again, because of the fact that I've never seen myself as somebody who could be alone, who could, you know, who could live by myself, I think that I was never going to be able to accept myself until I found somebody else who would accept me first. That, like, I needed somebody to get the full picture of me, to understand me exactly as well as I understood myself, and to accept that understanding that they had. And then I would feel as though I could comfortably be true to myself. And I found that with May. And she understood me pretty much right from the get-go, because I told her everything. You know, like, if anything, earlier in our relationship, I was probably closer to coming out as trans, because those were things about me that May accepted. But I also felt that in our relationship, like, I guess I felt like she wasn't ready for me to be as forwardly feminine as, like, because, like, that wasn't necessarily, it's something that I was hiding from my audience to an extent. It's like, okay, you fell in love with this understanding of me that is somewhat based on a false pretense. It's not that, like, it's not that I literally see myself as a woman. I'm just confused about it. But, like, I don't present the feminine aspects of myself in my content as much. And, like, I presented a lot of those elements to May, so it's not like she didn't have an understanding of the fact that, like, I could be more effeminate than I presented myself as. And, in fact, she liked those elements about me and embraced them. But I guess it's just, like, I didn't see her as, like, somebody who is necessarily in the position to be, like, to take care of me emotionally if I were to go all out. You know what I mean? It's like, if I were to just, like, act if I were to act like the baby that, you know, hasn't recovered yet, like the person who's still suffering all the fractures of what humanity has done to me in the past and hasn't recovered from, you know, like, whatever I've gained in the time since then. Like, if I acted like that person, will, you know, I mean, is there even a reason for me to act like that person? Like, is that person even need to exist, you know? And it's like, I guess like in May I find this like emotional restitution, and you know, it's like because of that I don't need it from everybody else. But I want, from this position I'm in of being like comfortable with myself and feeling okay as a person, like I have the time and the energy because of that I can go on to help other people. And it's like, in order to help other people, you have to communicate with them because you have to understand what their goals are. You cannot help somebody from a distance. Like, you have to engage with what their intentions are and try to figure out how you can help them best realize their intentions. And you can't do that if you can't, like, communicate with them to figure out what they're trying to do, and how you can help, you know? And, like, my problem, again, has always been this lack of engagement. It's like, I want to help people from a distance, or I want to do it on my own terms, because I don't want to have to, you know, navigate the nebulous space of getting involved with something. But, like, that's what I need to do. And that was the misunderstanding I had about, like, where I needed to go as the next step in my life. And I think I had that misunderstanding because I was not ready to be honest with people. Like, I'm not ready to be out. I was not ready to start presenting feminine or any of that. And, like, you know, I hit a massive wall when I moved to Boston where I was working towards this idea of being this person who was going to, you know, be more open and work with people. And then it didn't pan out. Like, a bunch of shit went wrong and I made a bunch of bad decisions and I had to try to turn my life back around and try to live logically again. And so I spent like 2 years obsessively trying to figure out like what new logic I was going to apply to my career that was going to make it so everything made sense again. And the problem is that my career never made sense as a result of doing things super logically. It made sense as a result of me doing what I thought was right and what I wanted to do, and, you know, and finding a way to make that work. And like all of these things that I've tried to do that are like based on what I think will help me to become more popular is, again, not based on any communication. It's not based on like talking to people and understanding them well enough to know what they want. It's based on like cynically viewing the world as an overseer and, you know, trying to figure out like interpretively what people want, which is like the slowest and most backwards route towards understanding it, you know? But like the only way that you can get better at communicating is to put yourself out there. And the only way you can put yourself out there is to admit what you don't know. And that's really where I run into the biggest issue. Is like I'm so bad at it, like just telling people like I need help. Like I need help. Tell me what to do. Help me out. Because like on the one hand, I look at it as like, you know, it's annoying to constantly need help, right? It's annoying to have to ask people something that seems like you should be able to figure it out for yourself. But if you can't figure it out for yourself, then, you know, being able to recognize that fact is as important as, you know, actually like solving the problem. It's like you're not going to solve it by brute force if you just can't figure it out, you know, if you're just not smart enough to magically know the answer or to solve it based on what information is at your disposal, you know, and maybe you don't know how to find more information. So it's just like you have to be willing to say like, here are the things that are causing me problems in my life. Can anyone help me with these things? And maybe they won't be able to. And that might be annoying that, like, you have to have interactions where people, like, aren't helpful. But, like, there's no way to have interactions where they are helpful if you don't attempt any interactions, you know? Like, it just always comes back to, like, if you can't put yourself out there, then nobody's ever going to know what you're dealing with. And they're not going to be able to help you. So it's like, you know, all this time I spent like putting myself out there to some degree, but never to enough of a degree where people could help me with the things that I'm really dealing with, the things I really need help with, which is like understanding myself as a human being and also understanding like what people's expectations are from me, and what people really want from me, while also understanding like what I want from myself, and like bridging that gap of communication where it's like, you know, it's one thing to tell your audience what you want from yourself. It's another thing to tell them, to ask them like what they want from you. But like, you have to work together to reach the place where everybody's going to be satisfied. It's like, I have this tendency to do this thing where I'll like make a Twitter, I'll make a tweet where I ask like, which of these things should I talk about? And I'll say like, what anime should I watch? And then I'll look at all the responses, and like, if none of them is something that like matches up like with what I was hoping to get in my mind, then I just kind of like dismiss them. But it's like, people don't like, I don't know how to explain what I was hoping for, because if I try and I do it wrong, then it's like I'm gonna get the wrong suggestions. But like, I used to get frustrated by that. Now, instead, I just work through it. It's like, okay, I guess I wasn't clear enough, so let me clarify more, and let me just keep clarifying until I'm understood, because otherwise, there is no progress. Like, you know, so many of those times where I do that on Twitter, the result is me walking away with no recommendation, with no, you know, ultimately coming away with nothing, because I, you know, like, wasn't clear enough about what I wanted, and nobody was able to find it because like they don't know what I'm really looking for. And it's like, all it would have taken was, you know, instead of just getting frustrated that nobody understood you, making another attempt at being understood, you know, until you are understood. And like that's really the core of what I'm trying to get at here, is that like, I've been too governed by this frustration, too governed by this feeling of like, oh, I couldn't do it, so I give up, you know? And it's like, you just got to get past the fact that like, okay, yes, communication is hard. Yes, people don't understand you. Yes, it is like a struggle and it fucking sucks. But you know what sucks even more is not understanding, like not getting any closer to knowing what the fuck is going on with yourself, or not getting any closer to, you know, the answers that you're searching for, because you know, weren't willing to ask. So it's like, you know, I guess this is just the meaning of the phrase "get over yourself," but it's like, I gotta get over myself, and getting over myself means not being ashamed of being an ugly woman. amazing. That scene got me pretty teary-eyed the first time I played this. My relationship with my mom is pretty similar to Claire here's in this game. I also have come to realize that my fursona is an owl, a western screech owl, the gray variant. I definitely relate to birds, and especially raptors, birds of prey. As a kid, I was obsessed with dinosaurs. I associate dinosaurs and birds with women in a lot of ways. But in my mind, everything's a metaphor. Everything's a metaphor for everything else. Maybe that's why I feel it's most effective to understand me metaphorically. So, let's talk shop. And let's talk admittance of needing help. 'Cause I'm not good at scoping. I'm not good at scoping a project. You know, this what I'm looking at right here, this is a pretty effective metaphor for the way that an idea looks in my head. It's like you see in the far off distance this massive island, and like the more you go around it to investigate, the more you appreciate its size and scale. And once you do a full trip around the mountain at this distance, you'll have a full understanding of how big the mountain is. But you don't actually know what's on it. So like if you wanted to draw this mountain, you could draw like vaguely what it looks like. But if you actually want to create this mountain, you know, if you wanted to like draw the mountain in a way where it would resemble what it actually looks like, i.e. what the developer did in creating the mountain, you have to draw every single fucking detail on that mountain. And it's like, when you think of like, when you think of a project, it's like I start to get the idea, and then I get a sense of the scope of the idea, but it's, you can't really understand what completing the project is going to be like until you start drawing in the details, until you get to the stage where you're actually like figuring shit out, you know? And it's like, let's say that I come up with an idea like digi-daily. I think this is like the most effective metaphor for like what has been the problems with me as a person with my career. So digi-daily was this idea that I had towards the very end of 2017. And the idea is that me and May were trying to like learn to draw better. Like we were practicing drawing, and my mentality was like, I know that I can get good at drawing if I practice enough, but I need to like really dedicate time out of every day to practicing drawing. And I felt the only way I'd be able to accomplish this was by listening to podcasts, because I thought drawing and listening to podcasts go perfectly together. However, there were not enough podcasts that I enjoyed on the internet. So I thought, I'll record a series of 2-hour podcasts for myself to listen to, for me and May to listen to, and we'll draw for 2 hours every day while listening to these 2-hour podcasts. Now, of course, I wasn't really thinking about the fact that I don't actually like listening to my own podcasts or like listening to my own voice. I like listening to my own scripted content and stuff where I really thought through it, and I get to listen to it back, and it internalize the lessons that I've taught myself. But, you know, my floundering, unscripted nonsense I cannot stand to listen back to because I already heard it the first time. So, like, aside from that, though, this project, it began where just like, you know, my thought process was, okay, if I record a bunch of these 2-hour podcasts back to back, and each one like just goes between we try to do 12 topics per podcast, then if I did enough that I had one to listen to every day for 30 days, and there are 12 topics each, then it will total out to an entire year worth of episodes. And so I could have just this casual thing that comes out every day. It's always on a different topic, so you never know what videos might blow up or which ones might interest people. And through this, I can get a better idea of, what might blow up or what might interest people. And it's also just an excuse to have digi content out every single day while I'm trying to work on bigger projects. Because at the time, I was all about trying to, get things out all the time that were simple so that I had time to then work on bigger projects in the background. Now, I only worked on Digi Daily for 2 days because I recorded a shitload of these 2-hour podcasts back to back. I basically spent like 2.5 days just nonstop recording these podcasts for this idea. Well, after those 2.5 days passed, I realized that this is taking up so much time that I didn't have time to work on anything that actually mattered for my career. So I put Digi Daily on hold and went to go do other things. Now, these episodes had been recorded I want to say fairly well before the end of the year. This is an idea I had in November or early December. So I was holding on to these 2-hour podcasts for a hot minute. And my mentality is well, this is already content that already exists. So there's no reason not to release it. But I wasn't actually sure if I would ever continue Digi Daily. My mentality was, maybe I will get back to this. Maybe I won't. But either way, I have, 45 videos now that I can release. And maybe by the time by the time I get to the point where I'm caught up with myself, I will want to do more. Well, this is not the case. I started releasing Digi Daily, but I never recorded any more of it. So for 40 days, there was a video coming out every day, and I never told people that I hadn't recorded more. I never told people it was all done in 1 day or two or 3 days, and that no more of it had ever been worked on, because in my mind, there still was a chance that I would get interested and want to continue it. But since I didn't, I eventually came to a point where having that thought looming over my head that I would continue this was starting to stress me out, because I had pretty much come to I did not want to do it. The videos weren't really getting a lot of views. People weren't really that into the concept anyways, it seemed like. And so I just became, doubtful and uninterested, and so I stopped doing it. And in my mind, this was no big deal, because this is just some random idea I had one day in late November, tried to do it, kept it around just in case I would want to continue the idea. But since I didn't, it was no big deal. But I wasn't really thinking about the way that it would be looked at from the outside. Because from the outside, it seems like this extremely ambitious project to have a new video come out every single day all year. And, obviously I don't market it oh, this is something that may or may not happen. Don't get your expectations up, because then why would anybody care? But if my marketing is that people need to be hyped for this thing, and then people get hyped for this thing, and then it gets canceled unceremoniously, then it just looks oh, so you're just a flake. You just didn't do it, And it's just to me, it was never a big deal. But when I looked at the reception to it, it's well, of course this would be the reception. Yeah, of course people are going to be upset that, essentially they thought they were going to get this thing that they, got excited for, and, and it just suddenly disappeared. And I really think that marked the moment where people really a lot of my core fans really lost faith in me as a content creator, because it was this thing just it was just so indicative of, again, the fact that I would cancel things and just seemingly not care. But again, I think the problem was the lack of communication. It's people did not know my intentions with this series, and I kept my intentions under wraps because I didn't want people to know, because I thought that people would not be excited, or people wouldn't believe I would do it, You know, if they had that mentality about it. And I mean, I was right. Like, it would have been correct for people to know those things, you know, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So that's what the point of this is. And I know that this is extremely long, and I'm not exactly expecting a ton of people to watch this or engage. There's a lot of people who really don't know what to think of like what I'm doing with my content. You know, I've talked about like some of my plans and like what I'm like trying to do in various places, but not really on the channel, you know, not the place where like most of my audience would see it. And like, I also think that like a lot of it has come down to the fact that, again, like my ideas are so big and I'm always trying to realize the whole big idea before I tell anybody about it. And it's just like, it's not reasonable to try to live your life that way, because like, how can I even predict which ideas are going to make sense in the long run? It's like, I need to not be afraid of being able, like, having to tell people, like, yeah, I canceled this thing because, like, it turned out it didn't make sense. And, like, you don't have to find that out, like, you know, a month later when you're still expecting it to come out. It's like, so, you know, I've been behind on my Patreon rewards for quite some time now. And a lot of that is out of trying to deal with emotional issues, you know, trying to take space for myself to figure out what I'm trying to do. You know, my life has a lot more elements and complications than like the things I talk about on the internet just the same way that anybody else does. It's like, you know, we all have things that go on in our personal lives that like are just, you know, not a part of our social life or career, that, you know, or which involve other people and our connections that, you know, that are like beyond what we show on the internet. And I think that's usually what people think I mean when I say like, oh, you don't see the whole Digibro experience. It's like, well, now people really know what I mean. But it's like, you know, like, I keep like getting so sidetracked with every train of thought I start that like I'm not getting any closer to the ultimate point I'm trying to get to. It's like I fell behind on my patron awards in my periods of self-reflection, and like I wanted to change the Patreon only after I had already like fixed everything, after like, oh, all the rants are done, all the care packs are done. You know, Otsuganzo tapes, I already have like 8 of them loaded and ready to go, and I have to make like a coming out video. And my coming out video, I have to wear like a specific outfit and have like specific makeup, and I have to make sure I touch on this, and this bullet point. And it's like, I've made a bunch of attempts. Like, I've continually attempted to write or record or do something that would be this like big all-encompassing idea. And all that it's led to, all this planning, all this forethought has just led to it getting pushed back farther and farther, to it continuing to not be the case that I have explained what my plans are, that I have explained, you know, my coming out. And it's been a month. Like, this has been what I've been trying to build towards for a month, and it has not gotten done. And it's like, this is, again, it's just indicative of the problem of my mentality. It's that in my mind, every idea is huge, and I get it in my head that I'm going to do those huge ideas, that like I'm going to do this whole thing, and then because it's like unreasonable to try to do that whole thing and also try to do anything else at the same time, and be like reactive and be able to help other people, you know, in the moment, and communicate with others and be a member of a community, which are all things I value. Like, I can't do all of those things and also be trying to make like the biggest fucking wholest ideas in the whole world. And like, ultimately, I don't even care about doing that as much. Like, going to that extent is so that the most people can understand, so that the most people can be entertained, so that the most people can, you know, feel a connection to me. And I'm not interested in reaching the most people. I'm interested in reaching people the most strongly. I'm interested in reaching people who need me the most. People who, you know, I don't want to just teach you something you could get from somewhere else. Like, I don't want you to watch one of my videos and it just be entertainment. It just be, you know, something that, you could have gotten from any other AniTuber. Like, it has to be that you needed me to express this. And it's not that everybody needs me. There are only certain people who need to hear from me in order to, you know, to deal with their issues. And I want to know who those people are, and I want to help those people. That's my goal. So, like, how do I do that the best? How do I best reach people who think like me? And how do I maintain a relationship with them and maintain a sense of community with them where I don't become alienated, you know, as the content creator, when, like, my whole goal is to be a part of a community and to be understood. Like, if I'm alienated, then I'm not getting anything out of it. It doesn't matter that you're getting something out of it, because if I just wanted to work for you, I would just be in the service industry. Like, there's no reason to be a YouTuber. It's a job with terrible job security. I mean, if you've never seen my video, being a YouTuber is great, you know, which is an ironic statement, of course. Like, I talk about all the major problems with doing this job, but it's like, what are the solutions to those problems? Like, the solution is better communication. The solution is making sure that the audience understands what I'm dealing with, and that, like, we're both working to be happy in this interaction. And, like, I tend to put everything on myself to be like, oh, I have to figure out what the audience wants, and I have to figure out what I want. I have to reconcile these things. And it's like, well, when do you get to have a voice in that conversation? You know, like, when do you get to be involved as part of this thing? And so that's what I want to do with this. Like, this video, as I said at the start, the intention is that you will comment, and I will respond to those comments in the next video that I do. So, you know, just you whatever ideas, whatever I spark in this, I'm going to read all the comments on this. I'll probably respond in comments to a lot of them. But I want to continue the conversation that has started in this video in another video that I make tomorrow. And to keep doing this, this is the new version of Digi Daily. Digi befriends the internet. I want to understand what you want from me. So, I already understand that, like, you know, people at the core want me to be an anime YouTuber. And I do want to be an anime YouTuber because I love anime and I love talking about anime. I do not love talking about current shows. I like doing content, and that show will come back. And if you're a fan of content, that's the only way that I'm really interested in talking about, like, currently airing anime anymore. It's just, like, discussion format every few episodes with Nate or whoever. Like, that's the only capacity that I really have any interest in talking about, like, current shows. I'm not interested in doing takedowns of shows I hate anymore. Like, I've already explored the things that I don't like about anime. I'm not really interested in negativity anymore. I'm really not interested in, like, you know, being a caustic critic or anything like that. Like, I want to talk about anime I like and the things that I've gotten from anime. And the Otagonzo tapes are the perfect vehicle for me to do that through. Because, like, the trouble I've always run into is I'm interested in talking about my thoughts on anime. I'm not interested in making the traditional type of edited video that exists on YouTube that I helped to popularize myself. Because that path has always been a sort of path of least resistance towards editing. But it's not very inventive, and it's very boring, and it doesn't, for me, it doesn't add enough to the spirit of my videos. The type of editing that I've been doing with the Otagonzo tapes reduces the parts of my video making that I don't enjoy, and makes it a lot easier for me to just fixate on the parts that actually matter, and, like, you know, getting the point of the video across in a way that people understand it, and not, like, worrying about, like, trying to bridge this gap of, like, oh, there's a certain level of quality of editing that's, like, that is what a YouTube video is, you know? It's like, a YouTube video can be whatever you want it to be. It's about whether you can inventively find a way to make, you know, relatively stiff writing about anime visually interesting besides just showing clips on screen. And I think I've done that successfully. So, like, the Otagonzo tapes frees me up in a huge way to approach my content more the way it used to be, where, you know, it used to be that I tried to get out 4 videos a month. It was like I wanted to have an anime analysis video every week, but I also wanted to make big projects that would take a full month to complete. And the problem I always ran into is that these two things cannot exist at the same time. I cannot put out decent videos 4 times a week and then great videos once a month at the same time, unless the decent videos take very, very little time to make. And the Otagonzo tapes take very, very little time to make because of the editing and because of the way that they're written, which is that they're not trying to be reviews. They're not trying to take a holistic lens of a show and tell you whether it's good or bad, whether you should watch it or not. They're not recommendations. They are ponderings. It's like, these are shows I've seen. This is the interesting thoughts I've had on them. Really, they're more similar to the Most Interesting Thing About series that I tried to do. But that series was kept to 3.5 minutes because I was trying for this like hyper minimal approach to like just talking about the interesting elements of a show and trying to make it as short as possible. And like, I don't think that really did much for my audience. I think Otagonzo tapes is much closer to like what people are really looking for from me. But it took like the recognition of that, like the ability to make something like that, to even be in a state where it's like, okay, now I'm confident about where I want to go forward with the channel, you know? So it's like, my vision of what my channel should or will become is that it will mostly just be like Otagonzo tapes every week, and then like, if I have ideas for other big videos, then those will just be done at the rate they get done, because there will not be a pressure to have one done within a time frame if there's always a new video coming out, if there's always Otagonzo tapes coming out, you know? So it's like, you know, everybody I think would be satisfied in this scenario. It's like, if all you really want from me is that I put out a new anime video every week that, you know, that talks about great shows and expands your knowledge and interest in the medium, then you will get that, which is what I think is all most people want from me at all. But then you'll also have the opportunity for me to work on bigger projects that, like, you know, a lot of people like want me to do the Asterisk War Sucks or like Sword Art Online, like some kind of huge project. And like, I love doing huge projects, but like, I just cannot do them and also continually put out, you know, a video every single week that is of a decent enough quality that it doesn't just come off as like, you know, just like shit nobody cares about, like you know, like some weak shit like Today's Anime, where it's just like, all right, I'm talking about current shows, like this is what you want, right? And it's like, you know, so I think that the combination of doing Otagonzo tapes and reworking my Patreon to specifically be for that show would you know, it would essentially give people what they want from the main channel, which is regular anime content, anime analysis that I actually enjoy doing because it doesn't require the parts of the job that I don't like doing, you know. And it frees me up to work on my own projects, be those more creative or more anime. You know, like I still want to do big anime analysis projects. I just don't want to have to do them like literally again on this timetable of like, you have to have a big video done every month. It's just like, I'll have a big video done when I am ready, you know, when I've had time to watch all the shows and am not like forcing myself through a crunch of watching a director's entire fucking career in the span of 2 weeks, because if it takes any longer than that, then my channel's dead in the water, you know? It's like, I can count on the idea that there will be content on the channel while I'm working towards something bigger, you know? Got the fucking silver feather, bitch. So, yeah, like, obviously this sounds like a nice plan, and it's also a very uncomplicated plan, and you might be wondering why I haven't just launched this plan already, and it literally is because I am stuck playing catch-up on so many things that, like, I have tons of rants, I have months of care packs that I have to get done, you know, like, and I've been afraid of, like, relaunching my Patreon before getting those things done, because I don't know what the new reward structure is going to be. Like, I'm not going to offer rants. I'm not going to offer anything that's an individualized product through Patreon. Anything that I offer that's an individualized product will be sold individually. And so, like, if I sell rants in the future, they will just be sold as rants. Like, you can just buy a rant. It's not a Patreon reward. You just buy a rant, you know? Likewise, like, eventually I want to do live streams where I do 3x3 reviews for $9 a piece. So if you just give me $9, I will review your 3x3 because a lot of the rants I get are for that anyways. I think it would be a really funny live stream service to provide. But yeah, like, more what I want to offer with the Patreon is like stuff that will be relevant to the audience specifically of that content. Like right now, you've got like the care packs and the 2 weeks review and the rants, which are all focused on the idea of me as a person, that like there is value in what Digibro has to say or what Digibro has to offer. And like, again, because I want that stuff to be sold individually, I want the Patreon to, be anime related. It's like the Otagonzo tapes is what the Patreon is for. So what kind of rewards would you want for like as a supporter of the Otagonzo tapes, not as Digibro, So I guess that's my first question for you as an audience member is like, what would you most be interested in, like, if are you willing to pay for the Otagonzo tapes as a Patreon? If so, would you prefer it be monthly or per video? Because if it's just for that one show, then, it might be that per video makes more sense. There's a lot of people who just don't like the per video way of doing things. They just prefer monthly in all cases. So I probably would keep it monthly, but I don't know what rewards I would be going for. And we'd have to set up an exact amount of episodes that are set to come out every month, Initially, I was going to make it a number that is higher than what I can actually do, because that's always what I do. I always shoot for the optimal number and not the likely number. And that, again, is the problem with my whole career, is that I always think of things in terms of like, well, I can do this much work, so let's assume I will do that much work. And it's like, this is not the way you should think. You should base it on how much work you'll actually do, and think about your life that way. But, like, look at this long, peaceful glide. So it's like, I want to know how I should go about changing my Patreon. Obviously, I still owe a lot of things to a lot of people, but the fact that that fact has held me back from, like, giving thought or asking people. Like, again, communication is key. Trying to get better at just like not trying to think of everything on my own and then come to you with all the answers, but to actually ask, like, what are you interested in? Like, what do you want this channel to be? And like, if the rants are not going to be a Patreon thing anymore, then like, should there again be, like, I'm not interested in bifurcating my channels again. Like, the way I had done things before is like, oh, this is like the channel just for this type of content, and this is a channel for like everything else. And I don't want that, because I want everybody watching my content to be on the same page. Like, I ultimately want a situation where you do not feel as though you are being tasked to consume every piece of Digibro media in order to be a fan of Digibro. It's like, if you like the Otagonzo tapes, then you can watch those and you can support the Patreon, And if you like the other stuff, you could do that as well. And in a sense, you might think, like, it makes more sense to separate things that way. But, like, there are some people... Okay, here's another... Let me back up for a second. One of the most important things you have to learn as a content creator or as a politician or as anybody who has to deal with a lot of people in your day-to-day is that a lot of people have the assumption that if you hear one person say something, it represents 1,000 other people who are being silent. This can be true sometimes. It's not usually. Usually, if more than one person says something, you'll hear from more than one person. If only one person ever says something, or only a couple people, or then like, it often can mean that the case is that those people are the only ones who feel that way. And, like, it's not that there's only a few people who give a shit about multiple types of content being on the same channel, but they're not the majority. They're a very loud minority of obsessive compulsive people, and I know because I am one of them, who, like, want to click every single thing that comes through their sub feed. And so they will very carefully, like, prune and manicure, you know, like, they get upset if a channel has, like, more of a type of video that they don't like than a type of video that they do. And I used to be that type of person, and YouTube used to really be oriented more towards each channel being something very specific. These things aren't true anymore. And, like, just take my word for it, I guess, as a person who has studied YouTube, that the benefits of having everything on the same channel are greater than the benefits of having everything separated. Even if there are some people who will complain and some people who will insist that they would prefer it be the other way, those are the minority, and they are not the people you should listen to. And that's, I'm not going to bother justifying that because I just know it as somebody with a lot of experience in the field. But it's like, I realized from a pretty, you know, like, late point that I was fucking myself over by having multiple channels, and that, like, there are a lot of problems I wouldn't have as a content creator if I had made it more clear from the very beginning that my intention was to do multiple types of content, you know. But again, it's not that I expect everybody to keep up with every type of content I make. I don't think most people watch YouTube that way. I think most people are willing to just ignore the things they're not interested in from a creator. But I do think that, like, you know, making it more clear what I'm all about, instead of, like, making content that is literally aimed at attracting new viewers and then, like, dragging them down into the deeper part of my content, has been the wrong approach. Like, my approach was always, like, you get your hooks in by making a video about something popular and relevant, and that's how you get people to pay attention to you. But when it comes to, you know, like, once they're actually in, then they get to see your real shit, you know? And that's, like, yeah, for me, it's like, oh, you know, yeah, you can watch the Digibro videos, but once you get to the After Dark channel, that's the real shit. You know, it's kind of the way I used to look at it. But it's like, it should all be the real shit. It should all lead into each other naturally. And to some extent it did. It's like, obviously, anybody who found my other content and was endeared to it started off seeing the Digibro stuff. However, like, I've gotten a lot of stories, you know, from my patrons and stuff, people who like my content, where they tell me things like, you know, I really didn't get it at first, or, like, I saw this video and I just thought you were kind of like a pretentious asshole, but then, like, once I saw this other video, then it made me, like, understand. And it's like, my intention should be clear in every video. Like, every video you see, you should know what I'm about. And there are some people who really accomplish that. Like, ContraPoints, you always know what that motherfucker's about every video, you know, because it's consistent in the approach and the attitude. In my videos, there's ones that are deliberately trying to obfuscate myself in service of being accessible, and then there's ones that are, you know, flagrantly trying to be myself. And it was just a matter of never trusting the idea that people would accept the version of me that is honest without first passing through the gate of having seen the dishonest version. When in reality, if I had just been honest from the start, it's more likely that the people who would have appreciated that content would have found it, because those people aren't looking for the type of content that I'm pretending to make. They're looking for the type of content I would have actually been making. And the reason I wasn't making that content is that I convinced myself it was cringe. And the reason I convinced myself it was cringe is because I never got positive affirmation for it. And so I stuck with the things that I had gotten positive affirmation for. And to some extent, it is wise to be aware of your own talents and to, you know, to capitalize on things that you're good at, especially as a means to live. But, like, if you constantly ignore the actual thing that you want to be doing and, like, the emotional state you want to be in, in favor of, something logical, then you are never going to satisfy those emotions. And, again, to get back to the comfort zone things I was trying to talk about earlier, like, I think that where you fall on the neurotyping chart has only as much to do with what you're capable of as it does with what you're comfortable with. And I think that there are people who are extremely emotional thinkers who feel the most comfortable being in a state where they ignore their emotions as much as possible and just try to work as hard as they can to put those emotions out of mind, because it's uncomfortable for them to feel emotions. And I feel the opposite of that. For me, it's uncomfortable to try to put my emotions aside and look at things logically. For me, like, stopping the emotional state, stopping the indulgence in the mood that I am in, because I feel like I need to be in there until I get it. I need to get it in order to move on. What is the benefit of understanding the way I feel as best I can? It's that I have a greater level of emotional understanding. Well, what are the benefits of emotional understanding? Like, what are roles in this life where emotional understanding benefits you? Well, it doesn't benefit you in making money. It doesn't benefit, I mean, it can benefit you in making money insofar as if you make art that people emotionally connect with, and those people have money that they are willing to give you, then you can find a way to get money from them. But that's the most cynical way of looking at the benefits of emotional understanding. And again, if your goal is to make money, there's a lot of better ways of doing it than emotional understanding, But, like, if your goal is, like, to help people, or if your goal is to be like a parent or something, emotional understanding is the most important. Like, I think most of the struggles we have with raising our children are that we don't understand them, that, like, parents don't get their kids, because in order for them to relate to their children, they would have to be able to understand the mode of thinking that a child has, which you grow increasingly distant from the more you have to deny your own identity in order to fit into your worldview or the world as you see it. It's like children don't make the kinds of assumptions about themselves or about the world that other people do. And it's easy for me to relate to children in that way because of the fact that I had different assumptions about the world from most people, and therefore I feel the way a child feels when I'm talking to people, and people treat me like a child. People treat me like I don't know what I'm talking about. People treat me like I'm crazy because I have these understandings that cannot be put so easily into a lexical package and just be like, this is the explanation of what I'm talking about. It's like, I know what I'm talking about. I just don't know, I don't know how to put it in a way that makes the kind of sense that will cause the idea to form in your mind the same way it has in mine, because it's been written in my mind in my language, and I have to translate it to your language. And in order for me to do that, I have to understand your language, and you can't understand the language of somebody whose culture you don't understand, because language arises from culture. And so it always comes down to this matter of, like, understanding the culture so you can understand the language so you can communicate. Well, what languages am I well versed in? I'm pretty good with the English language, but I'm also really good with the language of media, and particularly the language of anime, because I've seen enough of it to study its lexicon, And so that's a way that I'm able to communicate with people. If you understand anime, then I can communicate with you. Or if you understand the English language and its particulars and ins and outs really well, I might be able to communicate with you. But, if you have people smarts, if you have street smarts, these are things that, were more difficult for me to connect with earlier in life because I didn't understand the emotions of the people we're approaching them with. And so I thought of myself as bad with social interactions, bad at understanding people. But this is not the case. It's that I thought that I was bad at those things. I thought that I was better at logic because through logic, I've been able to communicate with people and have them understand me. But logic is not the means by which I think. It is merely the means by which I translate my thinking for others. For other people to actually be speaking my language, those are the people I would truly feel comfortable with, you know? And like, my family speaks my language, my wife speaks my language, and a lot of my fans speak my language. And I do feel comfortable with a lot of those people, and that's why I've you know, why I opened up my Discord, why I've been reaching out to people more, why I'm doing something like this. Because even though I know that there are a lot of people who watch my channel who don't believe in me, who don't like me, or who do like me but think I'm taking a wrong path, who don't like the way I'm treating my career, whether it's couched in misunderstanding or whether it's couched in disagreement, doesn't really matter so much, because I can't let the fact that those people exist obviate the fact that there are people who sincerely do like me, who sincerely do want to help me, who sincerely can help me, and who I need to reach out to and I need to be in good contact with in order for me to run this career and for it to make any fucking sense. So basically the way I look at it is like, this is the mature way to run my career, is to communicate with people, to you know, to make you a part of the decision-making process. There's all kinds of things that I have to do, and I'm not going to get into all of it here and now because, like, this video is already long as shit. I need to make a list, and I'm already interested in what the response will be to this, and, you know, obviously if I plan to do one of these every day, then it won't take very long before we reach a point where, you know, where the conversation has progressed significantly. But, and where I've had more opportunities to talk about the different things on my mind. And I've had so much on my mind. Like, we've barely scratched the surface of things that I could have talked about in this video. But again, it's just like, the longer I put it off, the more I try to say, the longer I've just been silent. The longer I'm trapped inside my own head, thinking all this by myself and literally not letting you in. Like, I've got a month of buildup of shit to talk about that I haven't found the words to talk about, you know, that I want to talk about with all of you. And, you know, this is the beginning of that conversation. So the conversation will continue tomorrow. So the number one things I want to know are, like, what do you think about my idea of making my Patreon specifically for the Otagonzo tapes, of releasing the, you know, like, releasing those probably once a week, that being the main content of the channel. And then, you know, whether or not I make, like, other big anime analysis videos will just depend on the rate at which I have ideas and can execute them and can get them done. I have a video that I'm working on for Pride Month that will be the sequel to the 5 Yuri classics you should watch for Pride Month. That it's 5 trans classics you should watch for Pride Month. I'm most of the way through Stop Hibari-kun for the sake of this list. I absolutely love this show. This is definitely one of my favorite anime. Hibari-chan is an idol for me, an absolute icon, a character who I, you know, am taking a lot of inspiration from. So I'm enjoying that quite a bit. And, you know, so I'm going to make that video for sure, because it's not a hard video to make. It's just a matter of watching the trans shows, which I want to do. And then I have an idea for doing a big video on Mashimo Koichi, the guy who led B-Train. If I do that, it will be a huge video because I have to watch all his shows, and I don't know how long that'll take. You know, I tend to have ideas like that and then talk about them like they're going to get done in a month, because, again, it could be done in a month. But realistically, it will probably take me like 4 years. So, you know, because I use a ton of fucking shows, and who knows how quickly I'm going to want to watch all of Mashimo Koichi's shows back to back when most of them are not very good. It's like, you know, I had the idea to do this video because of Pride Month. And if I had announced at the start of Pride Month that I was going to make a video about Mashimo Koichi, I would have done so under the pretense that I was doing it for Pride Month. It is now halfway through Pride Month, and I have not watched any of those shows because I had too much other shit to get done. You understand. This is the conversation I'm trying to have with you. This is the difference between the way I think, the way I project, and, like, what is actually possible. And, like, there's a lot of things I need help with. I'm going to be honest. I need a lot of help, and I haven't been asking for it. And it's hard to ask when you don't know who can help you, and you don't know how to phrase exactly what you're looking for. But, you know, this is an important first step. So tell me what you think of my ideas of what I want the Digibro channel to be. You know, I want my life to not be... I don't want to be somebody who gets paid to be a public figure anymore. I don't want you to pay me for being Digibro. I want you to pay me because you like the content that I make. And if you're paying me on Patreon, I want it to be because you like the Otagonzo tapes. If you're paying me on, you know, say, if you like my book, Kusomega, I want you to be able to buy the book, just the book, you know, not have to be a patron to support something, you know, to support my whole existence on the off chance I'll write another volume. Like, I'll write another volume because the first two sold well and I want to keep, you know, the story going. Or even if it doesn't sell, I'll keep writing it because I want to write it and because I don't need to rely on selling books for my income because, you know, it's not the only thing I do. But, like, it's just like I want the opportunity to work on things at my own pace, to live my life in a way that, like, I get to do the things because I'm inspired to do them, not because I said I was going to do them, not because the expectation is that I will do them at a certain pace, or because that's how I used to do it in the past, or because, you know, that's what'll make the most people happy. I want it to be that it makes me and you happy, that we have reached a compromise. I'm not saying, fuck you, your opinion doesn't matter, I'm just going to do whatever I want. And I'm also not saying, you know, like, fuck me, the customer's always right and I need to make money. It's like, the situation we're in is I'm comfortable in my life, I'm ready to move on, I'm ready to do my job in a way that makes sense for me emotionally, and I don't want to shut anybody out of that conversation, so let's all learn together. And, you know, if I burn away a lot of my audience in the process, that's fine. Like, the point of this is that me and the people who I can compromise with will have a good time together, and everybody else I will, you know, be sorry to see go. But, alright, well, that's all I'm going to say. I pretty much beat this game twice over in the span of this video, so, that's all. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.